So, Buchanan's analysis. So, Buchanan is saying that new economy has changed the state's role in every dimension, politically and socially, technologically and economically. Of course, we know that. Her argument is that this Westphalian state means what? The traditional state as we know it. Yes, Weber is saying what? That we need a legal, rational model of bureaucracy, and the state is what kind of a state? Is a welfare state. So Buchanan is saying with the rise of globalization and the features alongside it. What features? International institutions dictating what a country does, uh, and what do you say? Market principles or certain companies also dominating the policy making scenes. Similarly, uh, with globalization came ideas such as liberalization and privatization. So these things have put an end to Westphalian idea of state, that state controls everything. State is the state determines what happens in a society. Now we see, as we studied under a new public service approach and good governance approach, that the things are much more networked, distributed, and decentralized at this time. That is why Buchanan is saying Westphalian state has come to an end. Okay. Now, Deepak Nair and Amit Bhaduri will say that state has a threefold role now. Okay? In the era of liberalization, state has a threefold role, three very important functions that a state needs to function. Because why? Even though market's role has increased, the state's role has not diminished, but has been reoriented. Are you able to understand? Has been redefined in a way. State has become a regulator instead of a producer. Okay, that is why they are saying three new rules are very important of state in today's 21st century. First, strategic role, managing core sovereign functions such as defense, telecommunication, aerospace, foreign policy, etc. Second is the functional nature of a state. What is the functional nature? That now state acts as a catalyst for development. It acts as something called an institution that makes development happen, not by directly getting involved in it, but letting the private sector and civil society do a lot of the heavy lifting. So state is technically is acting in facilitation of development. Okay, this is the functional nature of state that they are saying. Then comes the institutional nature, performing the crucial regulatory function to ensure market work for public good. Why? Because market inherently is not concerned about people or public good or public interest. Market inherently wants something called profit. Right? So this is what Nair and Bhaduri are saying. Next comes Amartya Sen and Jean Grez's idea. They will say not necessarily that the Indian state or state in general has been uh, overactive or underactive in some regards. It is not necessarily that. State has been overactive in regions where it should have been underactive, and it has been underactive in the regions where it should have been overactive. Basically, the role of the state should have been to provide healthcare, education, etc. to people. Rather than doing that, state is doing other kinds of activity. producing goods and services, which the private sector can very well can do. Basically, by doing that, state is not providing a space for the private sector to grow. What the state is doing is state is taking over that job, and state is not doing the job that state is required to do very well. In their analysis, Indian state's failure, seen in Drese, argue that the common diagnosis that the state failed because it was overactive is only half a truth. They present a powerful paradox. The Indian state was overactive in areas where it should have been underactive, such as excessive licensing, license raj that was there, industrial controls, and other forms of red tapeism. Simultaneously, it was underactive in areas where it was required to be overactive, such as fundamental social sectors like primary education and basic healthcare. Are you able to understand? So this is what the role of the state, both Sain and Dreze are criticizing about. Okay. Now, there is another subtopic inside this development dynamics: bureaucracy and development. Now, the question is bureaucracy under post NPM approaches? We studied something called, there are few scholars who critique that bureaucracy is uh, not the body or the institution with which development in 21st century can happen. They are saying bureaucracy is mostly regulatory or mostly regulatory in nature rather than being more developmental in nature. It focuses more on law and order and keeps it checks on how activities are, what kind of activities are happening in society, rather than being a facilitator of development. Okay. Now, this is a critique that a famous scholar called Paul Appleby will give, okay, saying that in bureaucracy in the context of India also, Appleby will say that this bureaucracy is not built traditionally to do development. That is why it fails to do development administration. Okay, it is traditionally built to control and serve imperial interest. It is not traditionally built to serve public interest. Okay, serve a public interest and carry out development. This is what Appleby is saying. Takshila, under this heading, bureaucracy and development, just write Paul Appleby. I'll also mention him here also, because post NPM we do not. Just write under this topic, bureaucracy and development. Just write the term Paul Appleby. I'll understand. Because you will not, all of you won't automatically connect post NPM to here. No? That's why the spoon feeding. Uh, so basically, instrumentalist view. Okay. What is basically Appleby saying? This colonial interest or this colonial administration that was there, it was very instrumental in nature. That you ask them to do a job, they'll do that job. That is instrumental. In perspective of politics administration dichotomy, we understood what instrumentalist view of bureaucracy is in the introduction chapter. Instrumentalist means bureaucracy acts as an instrument, not as a free thinking entity. Just as an instrument, give them policy and they'll implement it. Okay. Minobrook conference first, when they came up with new public administration, what was their argument? That we should move away from this instrumentalist approach to somewhere that whatever problems in society there are, it concerns public administration. And the job of public administration is to solve these problems. We don't just wait for politics to tell us a particular policy and then we work on it. Rather, we inherently are very much interested in social problems, and the job of public administration is to solve it whether there is a policy or not. So we are not just instrument to implement policy, we are much more than that. We are receptive to social problems and act accordingly. This is what new public administration said, that we make public administration socially sensitive. Whatever social problems are, we get to solve it. Instrument view is saying a meritocratic, hierarchical, and rule based bureaucracy is seen as an essential for development. This is the instrumentalist view, that is. It can implement large scale projects, ensure impartial allocation of resources, and provide the stability and predictability needed for economic growth. This is the instrument view, that this is how bureaucracy should act. Okay. Now, this whole topic of development administration, don't think that because it is under a particular head, it will be only applicable here. Okay. Under bureaucracy and development, we'll read certain things. In further on, we'll read something about some feminist perspectives on administration. You can also include those here. Okay? Basically, read this topic combinedly. Don't see that this topic is that, this topic is that. Amartya Sen and Jean Dreze's ideas won't be limited under this unit or questions are asked under this unit. You write this in every unit, you will fetch marks. Okay. So that's why, because this particular topic, there is no one coherent story of this topic. There are multiple different topics and multiple different perspectives. So you read them combinedly, and questions won't be asked regarding that one topic. It will be asked in a very overarching way. So you give a holistic answer by understanding all of it. In development dynamics, we'll do after we discuss. Yeah, PYQs. Instrumentalist view is one view. What is prismatic Salah model saying? And Hamza Alvi saying when it comes to overdeveloped state? That these people are taking over the work of the market, and in prismatic Salah model, they are saying what? Ki this particular bureaucracy is not actually acting in a neutral manner. They are acting like a communal manner, like a casteist manner. That is why the very idea of them acting very objectively is false in nature, false flat. Riggs argued that in prismatic societies or developing societies, the bureaucracy is often not truly Weberian in nature. It is Weberian in structure, but not Weberian in function. I believe it was clear in class. It suffers from formalism, a gap between rules and reality, corruption, overlapping social loyalties. Instead of being an efficient instrument, it becomes a bottleneck that stifles development. Okay? Recently, you must have heard a news that I guess some company in Chennai is stopping operations in India because the customs department there are continuously harassing the company for extra money. Okay? This is an example for this. That it becomes a bottleneck that stifles development. Okay? Takshila, just write example Chennai in this one. Chennai. Chennai customs. Hamza Alvi's overdeveloped state. Alvi argued that post-colonial states inherited a powerful bureaucratic and military apparatus from their colonial rulers that was overdeveloped relative to the West. Relative to the weak native social classes, this powerful, often autonomous bureaucracy can become an obstacle to genuine democratic and economic development. This is what happened in the license Raj that took place after 1947. That bureaucracy stifled entrepreneurship at ground. Now that costed a lot to India. Okay, almost 40 years of economic development was stifled because of this. That was the scale in which this license Raj stopped India's development. Okay? That is why Paul Appleby will criticize this, saying this particular structure of bureaucracy is not there to carry out developmental activities or carry out development administration. It is there just to it is a very imperial in structure. It follows an imperial model of governance. Okay? That is why it is very tough to do good governance with this model of bureaucracy in the 21st century. Now, there is a debate when it comes to development dynamics that should we have a strong state or a strong market? Okay? The subtopic is this: strong state versus the market debate. Okay? Strong state. See, the state must play a powerful interventionist role in guiding the economy, picking winners, and directing investment. The market is seen as a tool to be used by the state, not the other way around. So this actually makes sense. Picking winners, matlab, for example, states sees that these are 5 companies in India that can be global leaders. So what the state does is state picks them, lets them or helps them get bigger and bigger. For example, ONGC. Okay, state helps these entities to be international giants so that Indian companies also become huge, such as Apple, Microsoft, etc., etc., Nvidia, etc., etc., so that Indian companies or Indian MNCs also are in different parts of the world. It increases the economic might of the country. That is why picking winners. So, for example, strong state supports the market to increase the power of the state itself indirectly. Now there is another model, the developmental state. It is based on Johnson's work on Japan. This model highlights the role of a pilot agency uh, and embedded autonomy, but the state is closely linked but interdependent from business elites. Basically, what happens in Japan under these models is, especially also happens in Korea also, that state departments are closely linked to these business departments. There is no separation the way there is in India. Okay? Basically, they are closely linked. State helps in every regard that through these businesses will carry out developmental activities. Basically, state uses these huge businesses as its own agency to deliver development and services. So this is a very in Indian perspective, given India's social structure, it is a very risky proposition that state using a company to deliver certain goods and services, and there is so much exchange between state and a particular company and a few selected particular company, because it shows or it promotes some form of what do you call that, crony capitalism. Yes. So basically, state in this cases acts as a backer for a few companies.
These services that these businesses provide also include environmental benefit.
I don't think so. There are some things. I mean, of course, these services that we will provide is basically market services only. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They are not going to take over the role of the state. See, there is a case study of this developmental state. Post World War II, these were called East Asian tigers, right? They grew so much economically. Use state-led industrial policy, export promotion, and strategic protectionism to achieve rapid industrialization. That means what? These linkages that we are talking about. These linkages means what? For example, the state is seeing in this particular sector there are two Indian companies which are doing well. State will do what? State will cut off foreign competition in those two companies for next 10 years so that these companies grow and grow bigger. This was used in these countries to protect their domestic industry, make those domestic industry big, and then open up their economy. That is why currently, when it comes to competition of these businesses, when it comes to countries such as Singapore, Taiwan, even Vietnam, South Korea, they have industrial giants. Okay? Companies such as Samsung. Okay? These are huge companies. Samsung, starting from mobile phones to watches, etc., etc., they manufacture defense equipments, everything they manufacture. So this is the scale of these companies, and government used the government's power to promote these companies and make them big. Okay, so this was the very idea of a what is the role of state in the market. Now comes the basically this model is saying what, that state plays an active role in promoting the market or controlling the market. Basically, state uses the market as a means to get to an end. Okay, this is what it is saying. Understood? Let's see what market argument is saying. That this is basically a strong state versus market debate. The free market, uh, it's basically neoliberalism. Okay? Free market guided by invisible hand. You understand what invisible hand is of neoliberalism? Adam Smith. Basically, for example, in the marketplace, if you are uh, if you go to a bazaar, okay, not Frederick's wala bazaar, any market you go, is there somebody controlling the market? No. Basically, you go if you want something, most of the times or almost all of the times you find it in the market. Have you asked somebody to keep it? No. No. Similarly, the market, the prices in market increase sometimes, decrease sometimes. Something is available sometimes. Some goods are uh, taken off the shelf sometimes. Basically, anything the market functions, it does not function because somebody sitting at the top is instructing them. What they function with? Demand and supply. है ना? Basically, Adam Smith says, Adam Smith is the beginning of neoliberal school or the liberal economics. Adam Smith will say that there is something called an invisible hand in the free market, that everything takes care of itself. You don't want state or any kind of authority to say what to do in the market. Okay. Now, an example of this would be, I don't know, in 2005 or 6, there was a hurricane that struck in eastern United States, okay, in uh, those states such as Florida. It struck. Hurricane Katrina struck. Huh? Now, when Hurricane Katrina struck, uh, the prices for water, clean water, increased multifold. So, somewhere the prices were around $100, okay, of a bottle of clean water, drinking water, because hurricane happened. Now, a lot of criticism started that what kind of a society is this, that during the times of crisis, that you are people are selling fresh water or drinking water at such a high price. What kind of society is this? This is not correct. That clean water shouldn't be sold when uh, there is some kind of crisis happening. You shouldn't use people's circumstance to get into their pockets. This is cold-blooded robbery. Okay, this was debated by scholars. Said that, I mean, this particular approach shows how unethical capitalism can be. Now, there was another argument against this. When it comes to morality, okay, there was another argument against this. Because in one day, there was price of a bottle of water was $100. Market is based in such a way that all the bordering areas of Florida that had supplies of free, what do you say, clean water, drinking water, suddenly those suppliers pushed a lot of the goods to Florida, driving down the water cost. Okay? For example, yesterday, if it was $100, today it became $5 or $10 because suddenly the suppliers rushed in because price was high. They wanted to sell as much as possible. Scholars argue that capacity of the government or any other entity is not there to always take care of shortages everywhere. But whenever there is a free market, automatically it adjusted itself. From $100, prices went down again to $5 or $1, whatever the normal rate of water is. Basically, this is the way invisible hand functions. Nobody asked them to send the water there. The government did not send the water there. Automatically, overnight, the suppliers sent their water because the prices were high there. Understood? This is how invisible hand functions. Invisible means you don't see it. There is no command, there is no order to send water from any bordering areas to Florida. It was automatically sent. Okay. This is what invisible hand is all about. Basically, this invisible hand, something that Adam Smith will say, this invisible hand drives the free market. And free market always takes care of itself. If the problem in society is the water is overpriced, automatically production or supply will come in to fill that gap and the price will stabilize in the short run. Even in the short run, not even the long run. Even the short run, the price will stabilize. That is why free market economist or laissez-faire economy was promoted by these neoliberal scholars. Adam Smith's invisible hand is the most efficient. The free market, Adam Smith will say, or his model will say, not his model, his idea, the free market is the most efficient allocator of resources. Now you understand why? Takshila, write that Hurricane Katrina example in this one. Allocate is the most efficient allocator of resources. Government could not have allocated sent free water or drinking water there. Automatically, the free market did. The state's role should be minimal in nature, limited to enforcing contracts, protecting property rights, and providing basic public good. Basically, a night watchman state. What does a night watchman do? Not in cricket, in general. Hmm? They guard the place, right? They don't do anything. They don't do marches, etc. etc. They are just there, just to see everything is not happening. But what does a night watchman mean in cricket? You all don't watch cricket. You don't know night watchman. Basically, you guys don't watch test cricket, I believe. T20 people. So in test cricket, what happens if the batsman, if the batting order loses a lot of wickets in the first day? So when does test match end? In the evening it ends. Okay? By 4:30 in the evening, test matches end. Okay. If the if a wicket falls and there are only 4-5 overs left of the day's game, they usually send a bowler there to bat. Okay? So that because in the evening the air starts to move, the breeze picks up, and bowling becomes easy and batting becomes tough. So that is why the teams don't want to lose a batsman during that time and give a soft dismissal. They send a bowler so that bowler can just defend and come back alive. That is night watchman's role. Same. The meaning is same. Basically, you don't do a lot. You just go and stand there and keep the clock ticking. That's it. The rest, the market will do. Basically, they are saying a very important thing. They are saying what your role should be is you should enforce contracts, protect property, that you protect private property, let private enterprise take care of the role, and provide basic public good. Provide basic goods to people, rest the market will take care of. Yes. Now, this is what market argument or the neoliberal argument is. Okay? This view is rooted in the ideas of people like Friedrich Hayek and Milton Friedman. Okay? These are legendary economists of the 20th century. It was operationalized globally through the Washington Consensus. We'll read about this. This is very important because recently, 6, 7 days back, there was something called. How many of you have read newspapers in the last 2, 3 days? No? Recently, in 2023, what happened was the way Minneburg conference happened, a lot of scholars came together. In 2023, in London School of Economics, 55 economists came together. Okay? Came together and they discussed the issue that how in 21st century economic policy should be or policy in general should be. Okay? We'll discuss this later because it's a whole topic that I'll teach you today. So this view, this neoliberal view, is rooted in the idea of privatization, deregulation, free trade, all the neoliberal ideas promoted by bodies like World Bank and IMF. Okay, they wanted this. For example, this is what brought in liberalization, LPG reforms in India, and it is called as there is a set of ideas called Washington Consensus. Just understand this that it is about privatization, deregulation, free market, promoting neoliberalism. Understand until this yet. We'll study this in detail afterwards. Now, this is what the market argument is saying. Okay, so strong state versus market argument. Of course, there is no answer to this. Who wins this debate, etc., etc. That's not our job. Whatever the question will ask, will give certain perspective regarding this. Now, the example of this would be structural adjustment programs that happened. We studied this under which topic? New public management. SAPs imposed on many indebted Latin American and African countries in 1980s and 1990s, which mandated a rapid and often painful shift towards free market policies. So they wanted these economies of Africa, Latin America, etc., even Asia, they wanted them to shift towards free market, even because at that time this free market, laissez-faire economy, new liberal economy in 1990s, especially in 1980s and 90s, what all geopolitical event happened? A very tectonic geopolitical event happened in 1990s. What was that? Especially in late 80s and 90s. Yes. Basically, USSR was broken down. Disintegration was happened. It marked the end of a Cold War. Cold War was no war between uh, nuclear powers or space race. No, it was basically an ideological war. Which is the economic model that works? Does American model work or Russian or USSR model work? Once one idea is disintegrated, it means what? Another idea inherently wins, right? And the era of unipolarism of the United States starts in a unipolar world. Now, recently, we see the rise of a multipolar world. But at that time, in the last, before 30, 35 years, unipolarism started. US was the sole superpower. There was no other model challenging the American idea of development. Now, why is so much problem or disruption happening globally? Because suddenly a new idea of development has come in with China that absolutely dismantles the free market economy that America has preached in the last 100 years. Yes. So, whatever they have mandated, whatever neoliberal economists have said, these ideas have been extremely popular since the last 30 years. That they are saying that in 1980s and 90s, 80s and 90s, So in early 80s also, USSR had started dwindling. Okay? People or countries knew that okay, this model is clearly not working. That is why these structural adjustment programs forcefully acted upon bringing these African and Latin American and Asian countries into their fold of economy, so that the companies of the West can go into these markets and sell their products. Okay? These things, when it comes to impact of liberalization of administration in developmental countries, these things I have already discussed and made you right. Basically, summary of the notes provided you previously. Basically, this is also a subtopic within development dynamics, so that I have put it here. Everything you know, shift from a provider to a regulatory state, ensuring social equity. That's government will work and improve on social justice indicators. Regulatory capture and corruption. That sometimes these companies or these monopolistic entities, they go ahead and capture these regulatory bodies. Okay, they push their own agenda. Accountability deficit. If the private sector, if we give lot of work to private sector, okay, if we outsource the essential functions to private sector, it means there is a deficit of accountability. Yes. Similarly, bureaucratic resistance. Bureaucracy do not want to change to from a very traditional role to a more developmental role. So these are the features of how uh, liberalization acted. Okay, I've already discussed this. Now see, uh, this women and development, we already have discussed these two ideas. Okay, the GAD strategy and WID strategy, women in development and gender in development. We have discussed this conceptually, but in your syllabus there is a particular topic called women and development and the self-help group movement. Okay? What you should do in this is, after this we'll discuss the feminist perspective also, but in these, don't get limited to whatever I have mentioned. Okay? Because there is no complete or finality of notes in these topics. If you get a new case study, if you read about something in the newspaper, you keep on adding to this. Okay, because there is no that I have given you a 2 pager about this, it does not mean it's be all and end all. These 2 pages are not be all and end all. And from now on, whatever topics we do, everything is like this only. You will have to add on to this. These things are, I mean, of course, for a fundamental understanding enough, but ideally you should bring in new things for value enrichment. Okay? Because it's not possible for me to give you everything and keep those notes limited. So there is an evolution of approach that has happened. First, women in development came in. What did women in development say? That whatever developmental model is, yesterday we discussed, whatever developmental model is, we put women into that developmental model without reforming the model. We just put in the existing model that women into that existing model without reforming it. Basically, saw women as an untapped resource to be integrated into the existing developmental process. It was often criticized for being instrumental and not challenging existing power structure. Gender and development came in. 1980s onwards, the current dominant approach, it focuses on unequal power relation between men and women within the existing structures of governance. The goal is not just to integrate women, but to empower them and transform the unequal social and gender roles. Transform the structure itself. That is the present challenge. We'll expand upon this afterwards when we read upon those feminist perspective. But now, according to your syllabus, this particular thing is given. So let's just read. In this also, you will have to put in a lot of case studies, whatever you find. There is something called in Manipur. Um, I don't know what that group is called. It's regarding mothers of peace or something like that. But I have discussed certain case studies here also. Udumshi I have mentioned, but ये सब repetitive हो गया है. So whatever you find, you mention it. Also let me know, so I'll mention it. कुडुम श्री मिशन शक्ति ये सब तो चल रहा है भाई 5 साल से. Everybody is writing. So SHGs, these are self-help groups are what in villages you might have seen. Uh, it's also called Swayam Seva groups. For example, Swayam Sevaks. Basically, uh, they these women groups form. Uh, I mean, they sit together, discuss together, share some finances together, and start some venture of their own, small cottage industry, etc. They this leads to what? This leads to some form of economic empowerment. Yes, this economic empowerment and women group uh, sitting together, discussing issues, their day-to-day issues also. This also forms some kind of a public sphere. You mentioned this term, public sphere, right? Jürgen Habermas, public sphere in this one. Jürgen Habermas, public sphere. Uh, wait, let me make it more detailed for you. Jürgen Habermas, public sphere. So, public sphere, Habermas will say that public sphere is something. So, what happened is in Germany, when in the 18th, 19th century, coffee shops opened for the first time. Uh, the citizenry, after doing their work, etc., they used to go and sit on in these coffee shops. They used to drink coffee, chit chat about a lot of things. This, these coffee shops around Germany acted as a place where political ideas or social issues started getting discussed. Yes, this means this acted as a public sphere. That this is a sphere in which public discusses public issues. This eventually led to political empowerment of people. Why? Because political issues and social issues that are being there is being discussed and people are forming an opinion about things. This led to more deepening of democracy. So Takshila, you write under this as an example that these self-help groups or self-help movement creates public sphere creates public sphere inside or in the rural areas where their social, economic, and political issues, there means women, their issues are discussed. This leads to deepening of democracy or democratic deepening. ब्रैकेट में लिख देना similar to the public sphere of Jürgen Habermas. J Habermas लिख देना, समझ जाओगे. Oh yeah. हाँ, SHG पहले समझ लो. SHG क्या है? सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप्स. Mohammed Yunus, you must have heard when Bangladesh this takeover or whatever they removed Sheikh Hasina. Mohammed Yunus, the Nobel laureate economist, he was made the president or the prime minister of the interim government. Mohammed Yunus came up with a groundbreaking idea. I mean, it was one of the most influential economic ideas or influential ideas of the 20th and the 21st century when it comes to economics with people or developmental economics is concerned. Muhammad Yunus in Bangladesh, he started a model where in a rural settings, women will come together. Women means group of 5 to 10 or 15 women will come together. They will pool in some resources. Pool in some resources means everybody will, for example, pool in 5,000 rupees. They have saved, they pool in 5,000 rupees. For example, if 10 women are pooling in 5,000 rupees, that means it becomes 50,000 rupees. Yes. Now tell me something. If you all of you have 5,000 rupees, or all of you have 10,000 rupees, we are five of us here. For example, we have 50,000 rupees. This means what? This means each of us cannot do a lot with her 10,000. But if one of us has 50,000 and has an entrepreneurial spirit, that person can generate wealth. Yes. This was a very simple idea, very basic idea. In Bangladesh, Muhammad Yunus introduced this concept that self-help groups organize themselves, women give loans to one of those members. That they pool in resources. For example, 50,000 loan is given to one of those members. Every month, whoever needs loan, they pool in resources, get resources, and give loans to them. These are what? Microcredit institutions. Microcredit institutions. Basically, if you want loans from the bank, you have to show paperwork, you have to show your IDs, you have to give a collateral, and then only you will get what? Loans. But when it comes to these women groups, these women groups did not ask for identity or collateral from each other because they are from the same village. They know each other wherever someone lives. Basically, there is no need for documentation or etc. They give 50,000 to that person and they know that she's my neighbor. She'll eventually start paying back once her business is set up. Okay. This led to two things: that you don't need banking channels to go there. Plus, you have cut out the village money lender who used to charge high interest rate. And you have empowered women with significant amount of economic capital, which acts as a seed fund to do business. Basically, these microcredit institutions grew across Bangladesh and they became an enormous engine of economic growth, especially economic growth in the hands of women. This led to economic prosperity at the grassroots levels. Small MSMEs, small businesses women starting from making papads, starting from making pickles, very simple operations. Okay? 50,000, I'm saying a lot of stuff, but it usually is a thousand rupees everybody gives, and in 10,000 rupees you can set up a small setup and start to do business. You sell them in the rural hearts or go to the urban center and sell it, and you earn a profit and business booms. This led to economic empowerment. Now, when this economic empowerment was happening in business, these women were coming together and sitting every week or every month. They were discussing serious issues, personal issues such as domestic violence. They were discussing issues when it comes to political issues, that which political leader or this political leader in this local area is not working, or these are the social problems that we are facing. And, you know, this political, economic, and social discussions and empowerment that happened through these institutions, it led to women getting empowered. This was the model that was implemented in India because it was hugely successful in Bangladesh. Muhammad Yunus, because of this model, won a Nobel Prize for economics, and it was one of the most influential ideas. Okay? So this was when we talk about that Kudumbashree model, it is the scaling up of this model only. Whatever the Grameen Bank model that was started by Muhammad Yunus in Bangladesh. Similarly, in Orissa it is called Mission Shakti. In Kerala it is Kudumbushri. Basically, all the states started implementing this self-help group ideas, that women themselves pool in resources and start businesses. You all understood how this also acts as a public sphere? What exactly is a public sphere? Why Jürgen Habermas' idea will be applied here? Hmm? This is what I explained. Economic empowerment happened, access to credit, financial discipline, entrepreneurship, social empowerment, building solidarity and a collective voice. Yes. And then political empowerment, gaining the confidence and skill to participate in local governance. For example, those women, once they have received some kind of economic capital, social capital, they know that they have the votes with themselves, they can stand for political office. They can become sarpanch, etc. etc. This is what is a more ground up approach for gender and development, because this fundamentally changes the structure in which governance actually happens. They are not putting in women in the existing structure of bureaucracy or etc. They are inherently changing the way governance happens. Are you able to understand that why this is a GAD strategy? Understood? Okay. The SHG, this is basically the application of something called Amartya Sen's capability approach. Basically, Amartya Sen is saying what? What is Amartya Sen's capability approach? What is Amartya Sen's capability approach? You must be knowing. Hmm? Hmm? Basically, Amartya Sen's capability approach is, Amartya Sen is saying capability is freedom. For example, if you have capability to do some kind of job, that means you have more freedom. For example, you are very qualified, so you don't have to do any menial job. You can do some better job. Of course, you are capable to do that menial job also, but you have a choice now. You can do that menial job, you can do a mediocre job, or you can do a job that qualifies your whatever degrees that you people have done. This means what? This means if you have more capability, you have more freedom of choice. Capability is freedom. That is why Amartya Sen will say that the state's role should be to promote capability into the citizens, among the citizens, so that people are more free. So this inherently increases the capability of women in rural settings. This SHG model, that is why it applies to the capability approach of Amartya Sen. Kudumbushri model of Kerala, basically the same model of SHGs applied in Kerala. Kudumbushri is the name. Seva, a pioneering trade union for informal women workers founded by Ela Bhatt. It uses SHG model as a core strategy to provide its members with financial services, social security, and collective bargaining platform. Basically, these women groups act as a big social power group or a pressure group to influence local level policies. Seva is huge in nature when it comes to helping women in a lot of things, providing them certain professional guidance at how to scale up their business, giving them certain seed capital to start their business, etc. etc. Seva is significant. Just read up on these things. Any other things that you find, you add to these notes of yours. Any questions till now? Moise, Rabe, any questions till now?
was not any state centered.
No. I guess Ela Bhatt, she operates from Delhi only, or Rajasthan or Jaipur, I don't know, but they are in multiple states. Yeah. Now, understand something before I go on to the next thing. Ethics of justice and ethics of care. See, all of these ideas that I will discuss will really help you in ethics as well. So use these examples in your ethics answers or your essays. It will be very helpful. Ethics of justice and ethics of care. This ethics of care, not that Carol Gilligan gave this idea. I mean, she was a pioneer of this idea, of course. See, with time, the scholars of public administration, scholars of public policy, scholars of government, they'll say, or just take the example of India. We see in a day-to-day activity that India's politics has gone from statesmanship that was with the early people such as Sardar Patel, Jawaharlal Nehru, have gone from statesmanship to something more of a nexus between criminals, politicians, etc. Basically, money and muscle power politics. It has become that. This is a concern of public administration. It says that this public realm, the values in public realm, or moral values in this public realm, is has been degraded. Hmm. Has been degraded. This leads to something called power, coercion, and conflict. Is something that is seeing that we see in everyday politics. The rich and powerful dominating, or the money and muscle power dominating election. That means conflict, coercion, power. These things are become day-to-day things in politics. What we want in public realm is justice. That is the ethics of justice. A thing will come up. Okay. This ethics of justice will say the previously the ideas that were cherished so much in the public sphere, such as ensuring equality, providing equity to people, human rights, letting people develop, letting people speak their own mind, letting people's voices being heard. These are very important, and these are very important ethical values in a society. Okay. No, wait. First, see. In recent times, the public realm has seen a systematic erosion of public moral values, with, with the ethics of justice often being overtaken by power, coercion, and conflict. What was the role of the government first? Is to ensure justice, social justice. The feminist perspective in public administration seeks to, now this is a continuation of gender and development approach. And this is not just a continuation, this is also a source of that argument. Okay? The feminist perspective in public administration seeks to address this by reasserting the integral relationship between politics and ethics. Now, how do you integrate this relationship? You bring in some ethical principles into politics. Now, what are the source of ethics? These can be traditional philosophical ideas, yes, but these can also be ideas that traditional philosophical ideas have also ignored. For example, the gender perspective of governance, of ethics. Basically, the argument of this feminist perspective will say that traditionally, what should be the idea of development has been determined by men only. Okay, women have a different perspective of development altogether, or different perspective of how public administration should be functioned altogether. Okay, we'll read that perspective. It argued that ethical discourse in the discipline would be both broader and deeper if it is were to include feminist analysis of concepts like justice, expertise, and leadership. That what exactly is justice? What exactly is the form of good leadership? And what exactly is expertise altogether? Expertise, is it altogether about only about technicism? Is only about the ability to implement something or to deliver something? Okay? Is leadership everything that the behavioral theorists started talking about, or what Maslow talked about? Not necessarily these are leadership. Okay? That means to broaden this focus, feminist perspective is included. Okay? So the traditional idea of ethics is called ethics of justice. That the work or the job of public administration is to establish justice in society. Traditional ethical reasoning in public administration is usually equated with the ethics of justice. Use these keywords, okay? Ethics of justice, ethics of care. Suddenly, if you put in these words in your answer, the examiner knows that you are coming from by reading actual books. Okay? Now, what is this approach of justice? Impartiality and universalism. Whose ideas are this? Which theorist? Impartiality, universalism. Classical theorist? Yes. Weber, Fayol, etc., etc. Universal ideas. Impartiality assumes that an administrator must adopt a universal, detached, and dispassionate point of view. Are you able to understand? The very idea of impersonality is this, that you are detached from the social happenings. Yes, this is what the Weberian idea of bureaucracy is, that there is an iron cage, you are away from them. And abstraction. It demands that one abstracts from particular experiences like feelings, desires, and personal commitments. For example, nobody cares about what you feel about in administration. That was the criticism that Weber gave to his own theory only. That it's an iron cage and personal identity and personal feelings are completely demolished in the process. And this leads to that feeling of, what do you say? What was that Marx's idea? Alienation of labor. You are alienated from the job you are doing. This is the ethics of justice that traditional public administration propounded. And these ideas are, of course, these are brilliant ideas that started during that time, because it brought public administration away from a patronage system to a more merit based system. But feminist perspective was ignored in this one. Okay? Now imagine Mary Parker Foley's idea. What did Foley say? That whatever Foley is saying, she started this very idea of focusing on humans when it came to within an organization. Yes, that human feelings are important. Yes, whatever humans are facing in a day-to-day administration, it is important. Basically, she said that whatever is happening in politics, whatever is happening anywhere, everything is connected with the community. So everything is a social structure. Organizational processes are social processes. Basically, to keep humans as humans, not make them impersonal in nature, not make them act like machines. That is what Fayol said. Now, Fayol's idea is inherently against uh, Fole. Sorry, Mary Parker Fole. Fayol though is a propounder of these. Uh, So, feminist political theory widely criticizes this ethics of justice, arguing that it is not neutral but is a product of male psyche. And it is therefore intrinsically gendered and limited in nature. That is why issues such as gender justice is very much important. Against this ethics of justice, Carol Gilligan, not exactly Carol Gilligan, but the feminist scholars of the late 20th and early 21st century will give this idea of ethics of care. That, in definition or the introduction of public administration, we studied what? What is the job of public administration? Is to care for people, care for their issues. New public administration did what? It was principally against this idea of impartiality or impersonality, that you don't stay away from public issues. Your job as a subject is to care about public issues, solve public issues. That means this idea somewhat resonates with the idea of new public administration. So Sheila just mentioned it, that ethics of care, similar to new public administration's idea that uh, social issues uh, are the area of study of public administration, or public administration cares about social issues. The discovery of this alternative moral orientation origin in a book or a work done by Carol Gilligan. It's called A Different Voice. In a Different Voice, it's a name of her work. Gilligan uncovered a moral orientation among women that centered on emotional relationships of attachment, interdependence, connection, and networks of concrete relationships. Which model or which approach talks about these ideas? From traditional public administration, new public administration, when we came to different ideas, interdependence, network, connections, governance approach, precisely. So, in the era of governance, you need these skills in administration. That is why the feminist perspective becomes very important, or women in administration, or women, gender, and development becomes important. So that is why, because these skills are very much feminine in nature, or Carol Gilligan is saying that these ideas have not been part of traditional public administration. That building relationships and attachment with organizations, with people, creating interdependence, creating connection, creating a network. These are viewpoints that are very important in modern day governance, and that is why they should be a part of these governance setups. Okay, so inherently this idea changes it. Takshila, just in bracket, you have written. Okay. It is claimed that women's experience, particularly as mothers in the private sphere, provide them with valuable insights and concerns that are currently absent from public sphere of the administrative state. The very idea of care, ethics of care. The mother cares about the children. Yes, it's not that father does not care. It's a very motherly feeling that we know it. All right. So this is what Carol Gilligan's argument is. So when you write these perspective, write Carol Gilligan's name. It's her work that showed this particular way. That, and why these particular skills are very much important in the modern day governance approach. Okay. Now Gilligan, basically these are differences. The focus is inequity, oppression that was happening. So during traditional public administration, these were the problems that we are facing. Today, the problems we are facing is attachment and problems of attachment and abandonment. For example, bureaucracy is very much away from the social issues. Yes. Core values are equality, universality, rules, and rights. Here, interdependence, connections, networking, these are values. Ideals are reciprocity, and equal respect. Okay, and here the ideas are attention and response to need. That means responsive administration. You are responsive to the needs or demands of the citizenry. Okay? Responsive administration is possible. Write that term, responsive administration. Now, the most important thing to understand is they are not rejecting ethics of justice. They are saying we need to evolve ethics of justice and include ethics of care within it. This is what they are saying. Scholars like Gilligan do not endorse rejecting the ethics of justice in favor of ethics of care. Rather, the goal is to temper the ethics of justice with an ethics of care. They want to incorporate both into political and administrative discourse because a flourishing public world would must nurture a commitment to preserve and protect human beings. And that is what is missing in the present day administration. And this is what they wanted to bring in. Hierarchy, objectivity, etc., etc. These are the skills that the bureaucracy or legal rationalism that the bureaucracy needs. That's what people like Weber and Wilson say. That was the very idea of dichotomizing politics from administration. Right? This is the traditional view of expertise of bureaucracy. That expertise can only be achieved when this bureaucracy is driven away from politics and it acts in a very instrumental way. Okay? Classical public administration was based on the assumption that its legitimacy came from being manned by expert professionals. This model emphasizes autonomy, objectivity, and hierarchy. This ideal is considered inconsistent with widely accepted notions of womanhood, usually what women or feminist perspective talks about. There has been a tendency to banish culturally feminine norms such as passivity and compliance from public life, creating pressure for all public administrators to project technically expert as tough, heroic, or masculine image. This is what feminist perspective is critiquing. Okay, this is not what is needed. What you need. Now, this is a second scholar, Camilla Stivers. Camilla Stivers will say this idea of neutrality, objectivity is very flawed in nature. He will say that prevailing idea of bureaucratic competence, which stresses neutral objectivity and hard data, is simply anything but neutral. Because of the century old association between nature and women, the privileging of separate self mastering nature is inherently gendered. Basically, it is saying that the traditional way of only relying on data and on decision making, etc., objectively, these are very much masculine in nature. Okay? Now, Camilla Stivers will say the nature of women to care about things organically, this is much more important than merely data driven decision making. Okay? This is what becomes important at grassroots levels where things are tough to measure in data. What kind of decision making is happening? This model of knowledge supports a liberal state that depends on the subordination of women and the private sphere. Basically, the traditional model was based on women should stay in the private sphere and men only take care of the public sphere. Okay? Now, this public sphere was changed where? In the self help groups that we discussed. Kamala Stivers is critiquing this neutral objectivity, that this whole objectivity is based on the masculine idea of objectivity. And here, actual ideas of women are not brought in. Now, what is the problem with traditional expertise that Camilla Stevens will say? It blocks connectivity and affiliation between administrator and the world. Basically, it makes them less receptive and responsive to the citizen needs. It takes them away from reality because they want to be objective in nature. They don't want to connect to the citizenry. Separates the individual from the field and raises the administration or administrator above the field. This means they cannot work effectively with field issues anymore. Okay, that's a problem. Then it reduces the client and citizen to a state of dependence. Rather than them controlling or instructing bureaucracy to do job for them, they depend on bureaucracy and bureaucracy's own time and pace to deliver them goods. Okay? Then depoliticizes the claim of citizen clients and discounts the value of citizens' view. Basically, what does depoliticization of their view means? Depoliticization of their view means that citizens have certain rights, inherent rights. Okay? Whenever administration is moving away from them, these rights are not getting realized. They have no avenue or agency to make these rights realized. This is depoliticizing their power. What is the alternative they are showing? They are showing that in the present day, to form professional competence that is non-hierarchical in nature and recognizes the importance of different stakeholders such as citizens, workers, etc., etc., etc. Basically, making them more receptive to different voices on the ground. The goal is to create a legitimate public administrator who is a whole person. He's not just an impartial iron cage Weberian individual. He's a whole person understood to have developed and continue to be a member of the society or the family. Discharge हो गया होगा. Yeah, very high chances. No? Can you hear me now, Moiz? Hello. What was the last thing that I was discussing? What did you hear last? डिस्चार्ज हो गया Moiz, reimagining administrative only. What was the topic? अच्छा रीइमेजिनिंग एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव लीडरशिप क्या लिखा है उसमें? उसने सिर्फ रीइमेजिनिंग एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव लिखा है। बोला ये तो पूरा यार पूरा क्लास ही है। So, when it comes to leadership, first understand what glass ceiling means. If you see present day organizations in the service sector since the last 20 years, okay, till the mid level or at the entry level, you will see the gender divide is almost 50-50. 50% women and 50% men are working in the service sector. in service sector company, in a service sector company. ठीक है? So after a few years, if you see middle and senior management, this representation of women started decreasing decreasing significantly. So in senior management, from here 50% 50-50 ratio, this becomes almost 90-10 ratio in favor of men. Okay? Why does this happen? So basically, this is called glass ceiling, that women can't go up after a certain level. So in service sector, if women are here in a 50-50 capacity, what is stopping them from going from here to here? What is the explanation for this? Movies and Rabe, what is the explanation for this? Why aren't women reaching senior management, senior leadership positions? More specific answer I need. Pawan, what all topics have you covered in your GS? You are? Hmm? In GS, what all subjects have you done till now? History, ethics, geography you have done. You haven't done society. Good explanation. People think women can't handle higher position. Not really. See, the explanation for this is very simple. Okay, women enter the workforce. After a few years, they get married. They have kids. Startingly, they take things such as marital, what is it called, maternity leave. Plus, women face something called a double burden. Double burden means they have to, working women face a double burden. Okay, Indian society में तुम्हारे काम आएगा ये सब. Working women, they have a burden of doing a job outside, earning money, and they have a second burden to come home and do the housework. ठीक है? Inherently, this reduces their time for skill development. Secondly, because of marriage, family, and kids, this added responsibility makes women automatically drop out of the workforce. So when they reach here, they start moving out because at this age they start having kids, etc., etc. And once you have taken a maternity leave, you have gone for example, 6 months or a year, your male counterparts are coming and working, right? So inherently, their numbers or their work experience, work X will increase at that time. So this is eventually creating a vicious cycle that women are being left behind because of housework, because of the double burden they are facing, because of childbearing, etc., etc. And this is causing them to, this is creating a glass ceiling for them. There is no inherent ceiling that you can see, but it is made out of glass that women are not going up from there. That is why the term glass ceiling is used. This will be critiqued by Camilla Stevens. Camilla Stevens will see. So this is the phenomena you understand. Okay, this phenomena is not critiqued. What will be critiqued is feminists like Stevens see the perceived need for leadership as a function of hierarchy. Okay? perceive need of leadership as a function of hierarchy. Why do you need people at the top? Because there is something called a top. That is why you need people at the top, right? Which socializes those in lower ranks to believe they are incapable of making decisions. This dissatisfaction has led to experiments with non-hierarchical form of organization. What does new public service or governance approach say? Flatter organizations. Yes, moving away from hierarchy. Okay, decentralization. That means and networked approach. There is no hierarchy between government, private, NGO, etc., etc. These work as partners. So inherently, networked approach does what? It takes away hierarchy from the system. That means they're saying this hierarchy is a problem, and we are moving away from hierarchy. So Takshila, right, as an example, the governance approach, and right, flatter organizations as a term. Then comes critique of interactive leadership, a concept of interactive leadership. This is an alternative model of leadership they have found out. Okay? That the feminist perspective is pushing. A more participatory, non-hierarchical, flexible, and group-oriented style. What is this? Behavioral approach? Yes. This is also governance approach. It draws on many qualities previously dismissed as feminine in leadership literature. Basically, these all approaches, these all qualities are all related to the new forms of governance that we are trying to do. That is why it is gender and development. That is why development not only does women need development, but development needs women. This is why this quote becomes relevant. That is what, if that quote is just simply asked in the question and comment is written, you write such an answer, writing these scholars, etc. etc. Okay, so they start with something called women are expected to prioritize family. Yes, Rabi, correct. Feminine leadership traits are seen as containing the seeds of new connective form of leadership that is coming out in a network governance approach. These traits include being skilled at listening, being empathetic, personalized, receptive, nurturing. This means what? These are the skills that are required in a modern day administrator, don't you think? For them to become more receptive to social needs, okay? More, what do you say, socially sensitized administration. Now, an integrative model. Feminists are not arguing that all women are interactive leaders or this style excludes men. They just want to bring in these skills into learn these things. It is not necessarily that these skills that only she has and you guys don't have. Of course, you have. The goal is to shift the norms of leadership so that feminist style is viewed as a competent and not as a replacement to the traditional form. This new integrative model of leadership, which is still changing in your day-to-day life, articulates an alternative that is more suitable to the 21st century governance approach. Are you able to understand now? Okay. Uh, Takshila, write one thing. This perspective of Camilla Stivers that women being connected traditionally more to nature, uh, in bracket write environmental perspective, that why in the era of climate change you need these perspectives. This is a long explanation actually. First, I'll explain something. Neoliberalism, you guys understand now. Hmm. So, a couple of years ago, in 2023, in London School of Economics, these group of 55 economists they sat together and discussed how economic policy and, in general, how public policy in the 21st century should be. Okay? Now, in this meeting, it was not. It was like a Minobru conference for economics. Okay? So these scholars came out with certain ideas that is very much different from how development was perceived 30, 40 years ago. In 1980s, USSR disintegrated. 90s, US became a unipolar, the world became unipolar in nature. US was the only one pole of power and ideas, everything. Any model of development that US showed, these models of development became increasingly, what do you say, increasingly followed in all the developed worlds. There is a particular term used for this called Washington consensus. There are some ideas of free market or neoliberalism that Washington consensus will open up. It will say that you open up the economy, you let market do its job, and things will be fine in the long run. What Washington consensus did was very much relevant for those era because America was the only this model of capitalism was the only model. Then a problem happened in 2008. That subprime crisis happened. Okay? That subprime crisis led to people questioning that exactly there are very much internal contradiction within capitalism. Okay? This subprime crisis of 2008 US, it showed or it led to scholars finding out new ways or different methods and whatever this Washington consensus prescribed. Washington consensus is prescription given by the US or US led capitalistic idea to the world that how to do development. Okay. In 2023, so after subprime crisis, a lot of ideas emerged that there are major problems in Washington consensus, etc. In 2023, when these scholars, economists of different countries sat down in London, they came up with a consensus. They discussed certain ideas that are important and are imperative to be applicable in the 20th century, in the 21st century governance. That how we have changed from those neoliberal free market ideas to a more responsive ideas, more responsible ideas towards society that ensures things such as social justice. Okay, gives a lot of emphasis on politics. Okay, politics is not a very bad thing. You shouldn't give everything to the market. This is why it is important in that strong state versus market debate. This will be important. Washington consensus is a more uh, market oriented approach, letting market do whatever they want, or a more market led development model. Yes, London consensus will be more of a government or politics being responsible to people, and using market as a means. Of course, letting market function. Market is an important player, but you uh, control or shape market that it works towards public interest, because inherently market is profit oriented in nature. Okay. Now, Washington consensus gave certain principles. Okay. These are sometimes called the commandments of Washington consensus. Why a commandment? It is coming from Washington. It is a uniform. It is the center of all kinds of power in the world. That defined the era of hyper globalization to the more nuanced, state aware, and context specific core principles of the emerging London consensus. Basically, in hyper globalization, it showed a form of one best way of doing things. The commandments of Washington consensus, it showed a classical public administrative approach of one best way. See, this is not only limited to public administration. This is economy, politics, governance, everything. Okay? So that is why this Washington consensus was a one best way. This was a rigid market fundamentalist commandment. Now, what does this Washington consensus say? In 80s and 90s, Washington consensus was a set of 10 specific neoliberal policy prescriptions. These are policy prescriptions that became the standard reform package for developing countries in crisis. Any problems you are facing, there is only one package to fix it. That is the Washington model of development. The term was coined in 1989 by an economist named John Williamson. Williamson gave this idea. It reflected the shared views of Washington, D.C. based institutions, the IMF, the World Bank, and the US Treasury Department. This was born out of the reaction of a perceived failure of state led developmental models. What does this mean? Born out of a reaction to the perceived failures of state led development models. What is this referring to? Event. It is referring to an event.
So it's acted without taking market into consideration decisions on its own and it failure in that segment.
Yeah, explanation is correct. But what is this referring to? In 1989, state-led development model. Basically, the Soviet model of development. Okay? So this was a reaction to this Soviet disintegration, that see why they disintegrated and why we still stand more powerful than ever, because our model of development works. The core belief was that economic growth in developing countries could be best achieved through free markets, minimal state intervention, and strict fiscal discipline. This was presented as a universal recipe for prosperity. What does this mean? The one best way to prosperity. There is no other model. That you let free market do the job. You don't interfere into the market. Minimum state intervention and strict fiscal discipline. That you don't uh, fiscally borrow so much, or I mean, you should be very fiscally prudent in nature. So this was the Washington model. So 10 commandments, I mean, it's a lot. We'll discuss it tomorrow. And we'll discuss how the London model is very much different from it. Because recently in news also it's going, and also very important for public administration. Washington consensus and London consensus. Okay. Any questions till now? Any questions, Rabe and Moise?